Ray Kelly lashing out, and now Bill Bratton fighting back. We're going to talk about the battle between the former NYPD commissioners, both former and current one. New York, it is big enough for two feuds, and it's got to. Cuomo and de Blasio, yes, they're still at it. The governor's latest diss of the mayor that's got people buzzing. Then the email controversy that will not go away for one Hillary Clinton. But what can she do to deal with it? Well, we'll bring in our political power panel who've got their own ideas. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and we're going to start with Bill Bratton versus Ray Kelly. The current NYPD commissioner, he is squabbling with a former top cop, and it all started when excerpts from Kelly's new book hit the press. Kelly, he goes after Bratton as well as Mayor de Blasio about many things, including stop and frisk. Here, just a small sample. Quote, de Blasio shrugged and walked away from routine useful policing tools, snatching law enforcement defeat from the jaws of legal victory. I personally resent the implications of de Blasio's false narrative. He goes on to say, I knew the truth, that our policies targeted reported crimes. We didn't target people based on their skin color. Well, Bratton immediately blasted back, defending not only his boss, but also the move to curb, if not get rid of, stop and frisk.
Commissioner Kelly is entitled to his opinion. This mayor, during my time as commissioner, has been the most supportive mayor I've ever had. The belief that crime was associated exclusively with SQF, that's not correct. It was not the dominating factor.
Now, Bratton didn't stop there. He went on to explain why he feels that stop, question, and frisk hurts community relations.
Was clearly creating a very significant rift, if you will, between people of color in the city and this police department, and that's unfortunate.
Now, it's not just stop and frisk. Bratton and Kelly also disagree on how to handle the growing homeless problem and more. All right, let's bring in our panel. Jeannie Zano, professor of political science at Iona College, also professor of campaign management at NYU. Also, she wrote a piece we're going to get into a little later on how at least one New Yorker may be handling his problems differently. Speaking of New Yorkers, Dominic Carter's covered them all, political journalist and author. Journal News columnist Phil Reisman, we're going to be talking about some political headaches in Mount Vernon and beyond with him as well. And Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent, all of the above. All right, Dom, now you've covered both of these guys. To explain to folks about the dynamic, it's been, Bratton, Kelly, Bratton, it's kind of musical chairs between the two. There's no love lost between the two of them, but it's their job to defend their bosses, even if they don't completely agree with the policies, right?
You just laid it out in a complete nutshell. You have to go back to the end of David Dinkins' tenure. Mayor, he's leaving. Rudy Giuliani's coming in, right? And Ray Kelly was already the police commissioner under Dinkins. What your assessment is correct. You're really talking about two top dogs, and they can only be one. And each of these gentlemen think that they are better as police commissioner than the other. So Ray Kelly's police commissioner, Rudy comes in, Kelly auditions and interviews for the job. Rudy goes to Boston and brings in Bratton. That was the beginning of the end. From that moment on, Richard, these two guys have never, ever, ever liked each other. And it's personal. They'll say something different publicly, but it's personal. So then their careers, they come back, one's police commissioner, another's police commissioner. At the end of the day, again, going to the question that you raised, Bratton is defending his boss. What's ironic about this, who really started stop and frisk? Bill Bratton. But yet he's now advocating and arguing an exactly different point of view. Why? Because of the boss that he works for is not big on stop and frisk.
It doesn't really seem like their policies are that far apart from each other. I mean, I think if you asked Bratton in his heart of hearts if he wanted stop and frisk, he'd probably say yes. I'm curious, what's your take on that? Are they really that far apart as the spat would have us to believe? Again,
it's all about personality here. These guys don't like each other. There's no other way to say it. Bill Bratton will tell you he's much better than Ray Kelly. Ray Kelly will tell you he's definitely better than Bill Bratton.
Also, big difference in administrations, in tone and style. You look at from Giuliani, which wanted to pick a fight every day, it seemed. Bloomberg, who seemed he was above it all, but he'd deal with it. And de Blasio, I don't know how we characterize it yet with the administrations, but totally different styles for the administrations, right?
Totally different styles. Rudy was, we can't do stop and frisk enough, and then you have a Bloomberg in between. But then de Blasio comes in and says, with the help of a federal judge, we're going to stop this. And the stop and frisk numbers are drastically lowered.
Now, and speaking of the numbers, though, Phil, you saw the pushback. It wasn't just on homelessness, which you talked about, but also crime, and which is where this really came out of. De Blasio, as well as Bratton, said, look at the numbers. A lot of this stuff is rhetoric, everybody. Everybody loves to talk about how much more dangerous the city is. The math says it isn't. For the second year in a row, murder's down here. I know there's different numbers you can pick out, but this narrative that the city's going back to the bad old days, this administration says isn't the case. Is this perception and reality, or is it both?
Well, first of all, I was just going to say that these guys have, something different names for the same brand. Also, I mean, it's like there is some evidence, for example, that Bratton's idea of the broken windows policy, which is to go after, squeegee men, the Giuliani stuff, all that stuff, and quality of life things, and a lot of those efforts, I think, have brought the crime down only because it creates, or at least it creates a perception that crime has gone down. On the other hand, that same policy resulted in the Eric Garner case. So you have this downside, and then you have this tension between, particularly the black community and the police department. So even if the crime numbers are down, you still have this perception that the police are not, necessarily acting the best way with the regular citizens.
What about the perception that the city is less safe now? I mean, at some point, Rich was asking about perception versus reality. At some point, doesn't the perception run the risk of becoming the reality?
Well, now we're really getting into it. What's perception, what's reality? I don't know how to answer
Well, you know
that,
what, Jeannie, in a silly way, you take the Times Square case, right?
Yeah.
With the topless women, with the painted women, and how they'd handle it. We would joke on the set, do you imagine if this happened under Rudy? Or even for that matter, if it handled under Bloomberg? Either one of the two guys would either have said, I'm not going to deal with it because this is you can't win this thing, or if I'm going to take a position, I'm going to make sure I'm going to close on it. Or the other one would have made this a cause celeb, and there would have been 20,000 cops in Times Square if Rudy was there or something. So it is perception. I mean, nobody thinks the topless ladies are going to make New York go, back to the 70s, right? But how these guys handle this and how their commissioners come out and what they say, it really shapes the whole perception here.
I mean, I don't know. Our governor came out and said he thought the topless women in Times Square were bringing us back to the pornographic 1970s.
What did he do about it?
Well, you know what he did about it. He stepped in where the mayor wasn't willing, and I have to bicker.
But they're still there.
Yeah, they absolutely
Right.
are, but I have to bicker a little bit with the numbers issue. Crime is down overall. Gun crime is up, murders are up, and rape is up in the city. Now, this is not just New York City. You all saw the cover of the New York Times today. Crime is up, murders are up across the country in major cities. But I think we have to be clear.
Comparatively, New York far
New York
less
is
so than
doing
some of the
okay.
major cities that the Times hit.
But against last year and the year before, murders, rapes, and gun violence is absolutely up. Overall, crime is down 4%. But it's those types of violent crimes that people are really concerned about, as are gang-related attacks. And so I think we have to be clear about. But, if you're going
to compare it for a second, as the implication was from Rudy and then even Kelly to the side, we're on the slippery slope back to the 70s. Come on.
But that's what they've been saying since Loda ran against de Blasio. I mean, that's been the argument. And, I don't think we're on a slide back to the 1970s, but, people want to laugh at the public. But you look at the polls and the public says they don't feel safe. There's more graffiti, there's more homelessness, there's more violent crime.
Don,
but
everything Jeannie says is right. You look at the polls, is that more of a reflection of the mayor or for what they see every day on the street?
It's actually both, because perception does become reality. There are some, my colleague disagrees. You know how I feel how the mayor's operation has gone as of late. Let's just say a thumbs down. And he did get rid of a deputy mayor. He's trying to turn things around. But also the perception is that the city is, I'm not going to say falling apart, but homeless people, there's a perception. When you see homeless people almost, I'm not going to say everywhere, but in many locations, So perception does become reality.
And can I just interrupt
Sure,
for a second? The
sure.
number of homeless people is up. I mean, it's not just a perception.
The mayor
People
finally
aren't crazy.
acknowledged that today.
The numbers are up. You look at the statistics. Now, that's not to say that's de Blasio's fault and, he came in and that happened. But that's the reality. Sorry to interrupt you. So
No,
it's
no,
not just a fantasy that people are having.
The idea that the city is slipping back to the 70s, I'm old enough to remember the 70s in New York City.
Just
I
look at
remember-
Times Square then and
Oh
now.
my
I mean,
God, there's no comparison. The problem with Times Square isn't the people doing this performance nonsense. It's the crowds. Actually, it's a measure of its success right now. I mean, there's tourists there. You can't get through them. There's so many of them there. So
it is interesting. I think it finally came to a head with the two administrations and the two sounding boards going at it. And we're going to get into a little bit about what this mayor can or can't do to really change the narrative, which I know you wrote about, G.D. And I want to get you at home involved in the conversation as well. Head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on our question: how should Hillary Clinton deal with the email controversy? We're going to be getting into that topic very shortly. All right, stay with us. RFL back right after this.